Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Saturday, September 28th. Today is day 358. Please be in prayer for the people of Lebanon who have suffered such severe attacks the past several days, including the most recent bombing of Beirut, which I'll give you an update about. Pray for the people of Gaza who continue to be squeezed by limitations of shipments of food, humanitarian aid, and desperately needed supplies because of the siege upon their borders, and pray for the people of Israel, many of whom are at war with their own government, calling for the release of hostages and also a ceasefire deal to be made. So today is day 358. Use these updates to motivate you to pray, to have discernment about ways to act and engage. Go to our website at Churches for Middle East Peace if you would like to know ways that you can get involved constructively. Including our upcoming Solidarity Sunday, where we're encouraging churches to pray for peace and to support efforts towards peace. That's on October 6th. And then also our Vigil of Lament on the year anniversary of October 7th. It's unfathomable that this has been going on that long. I wanted to start with an example, a perfect example of how much it matters where we get our news and how different stories are told. So yesterday at the United Nations, the Associated Press said that when Netanyahu entered the hall and was introduced, there were boos, raised voices, and delegates walked out. And they used the term many delegates. Now, the Middle East, I reported the same story, and they said that scores of delegates walked out. They told the story and said that several diplomats could be seen walking out in haste. As Netanyahu entered the Great Hall, when the presiding diplomat had to shout "order, please," as the Israeli leader took the stage. And then, a score is 20, so scores would be, multiples of 20. And then Haaretz reported and just said that prior to Netanyahu's speech at the United Nations, there were some delegations that walked out. And so I had to, as I was reading multiple news sources, I was like, oh my gosh, like, how do we even figure out what's going on when the news is so vastly different depending on what news sources you read? Local New York City ABC 7 News reported that there were thousands that protested Netanyahu's address at the United Nations. And during that speech, Netanyahu said that Israel's war on Hamas and Hezbollah would continue unabated, adding that Israel does not seek to resettle Gaza, but we seek a demilitarized and de-radicalized Gaza. All Hamas needs to do is surrender, lay down its arms, and release the hostages. He said that Israel was ready to work with regional and other partners to support a local civilian administration committed to peaceful coexistence. He said Hamas would have no role in a post-war Gaza. Netanyahu insisted that Israel has no choice and every right to strike Lebanon, and warned that Israel would continue degrading Hezbollah until all of their objectives are met. He said, we won't rest until our citizens can return safely to their homes. And we will not accept a terror army perched on our northern border. At the UN, the premier said, until this anti-Semitic swamp is drained, the UN will be viewed by fair-minded people everywhere as nothing more than a contemptuous farce. He also went on to talk about the possibility that an ICC arrest warrant would be issued against him is hard to explain as anything other than pure anti-Semitism. Now, according to reports about that same time, Lebanon was being bombed, and the AP News reported around 2 o'clock this morning in Lebanon and Friday night in New York that there was the biggest attack to hit Beirut within the last year. 6 buildings were struck. We know that at least 6 people were killed and 91 people were wounded. The 6 buildings that were targeted, it's expected the death toll will still rise as bodies are uncovered beneath the rubble. And it's said that Israel launched this attack because they were targeting Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah. It's not clear if Nasrallah was at the site. This was reportedly Hezbollah's headquarters. and Hezbollah has not commented as of yet. It's currently right now, I'm still in South Korea, about 4:00 p.m. on Saturday in South Korea. The IDF did acknowledge that it carried out a precision strike on Hezbollah's headquarters in a residential area in South Beirut, as there were reports about powerful explosions in the Lebanese capital. But after Netanyahu failed to address the U.S.-French proposal for a 21-day ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, he insisted that Israel will continue to fight full force. And John Kirby of the U.S. National Security Council, he's their spokesperson, said that statements calling for a truce were not drawn up in a vacuum. He said it was done with careful consultation, not only with countries that signed onto it, but also with Israel. Netanyahu's office responded in English, saying that Israelis and the U.S. officials met on Thursday, that they discussed the proposal, and that Israel shares the aims of the United States and the U.S.-led initiative of enabling people to return to the north border safely and securely, and that they appreciate the U.S. efforts because the U.S.'s role is indispensable in advancing stability and security in the region. Meanwhile, the Lebanese foreign minister appealed to the United Nations to secure an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah before the situation spirals out of control, making the crisis impossible to contain. Also, in the last several days, in the midst of the attacks on Lebanon and the attacks in North Israel, a number of Hezbollah officials and leaders have been killed, according to Israeli sources, including the head of Hezbollah's air defense system. He was believed to have just returned from Lebanon to Lebanon from Yemen, and was also responsible for launching of missiles and drones by the Houthi forces. And today it was reported that 2 additional Hezbollah officials were killed in the most recent attacks on Beirut. Israeli fighter jets struck dozens of Hezbollah targets in South Lebanon, in addition to rocket launch sites that have been targeting northern Israeli cities. And in Israel, a 25-year-old man was moderately wounded. Lebanese health minister said that 25 people were killed in Israeli strikes across Lebanon since the early hours of Friday. A Lebanese news agency also said that there was a family of 9 that was killed in an Israeli airstrike in a village in South Lebanon. More than 30,000 people, mostly Syrians, have crossed into Syria from Lebanon in the last 72 hours. And I'll be honest, if you look at the maps of where there have been bombings across the state of Lebanon, and if you look at where there's been rocket fire that's been hitting northern Israel, the situation's really, really scary. And that's on top of what's been happening in Gaza the last 11 plus months. So US President Biden ordered the Pentagon to assess and adjust as necessary the US forces and the US posture in the Middle East, according to the White House. And there's still conversations about what all this means for Gaza. So Hamas has stopped responding to ceasefire conversations and proposals relayed by countries that are involved in the truce mediations in recent weeks. They've said that they have no information about Yahya Sinwar. It's not believed that he's dead, but he has not been in contact for the past few weeks. They said, in fact, we're not receiving any communication from Hamas, and we cannot determine if this is related to Sinwar. IDF sources reported to Haaretz that Netanyahu's government has been warned if hostages are not released soon, it is not certain there will be anyone left to be returned alive. Hamas's military wing, according to IDF sources, they said that Hamas's military wing has been defeated and is currently operating as a guerrilla organization in the Gaza Strip. And a gunman in Gaza shot and killed a Palestinian aid worker from a US-based charity, firing on her car in what officials from the government said was a case of mistaken identity. The death toll in Gaza is 41,534 Palestinians. So in terms of the Houthis, there was a surface-to-surface missile that was fired at Tel Aviv and central Israel from Yemen overnight. That was intercepted by the aerial defense system. And the Iranian-backed Houthis claimed responsibility for the launch. And Saudi Arabia formed a global alliance to push for a two-state solution in regard to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, according to Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud. He said that late last week on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. The alliance includes, there's a number of Arab and Muslim countries and European partners, according to the Saudi state news. And the EU foreign policy chief, Joseph Borrell, said on X that the first meetings will take place in Riyadh and Brussels. Finally, 5 Syrian soldiers were killed and 1 wounded in an Israeli airstrike on military targets near Damascus and on the Syrian-Lebanese border, according to Syrian news sources. And I just would say, continue in your collective efforts towards peace. They are now more important than ever. So may God go before us. Amen.